So welcome to our Global Network webinar. And my name is Yuxi Zhang, and I will be moderating this webinar together with my colleague Alexander Loschke and Shen Lovell. Today, we are pleased to have our two speakers, Fionntan O Donnell from Open Data Institute and Andrew Dudfield from FullFact. Both of them will present how changes in the publishing of national statistics can support the work of fact checker around the world. So data publishing by national statistical offices affects the fact-checking process in many ways, from what fact checker choose to verify to how they find data to the human support they get. Better statistical data means easier and faster fact-checking, which leads to more fact checks being published and the misinformation being addressed faster. During the webinar, our presenters will discuss this topic and also the software and AI tools they have created to help fact-checking, which rely on national statistical data. So let me now introduce our speakers. Fionntan O Donnell is Senior Data Technologist at Open Data Institute, researching topics like AI, anonymization, and misinformation, and how they affect trust and the use of data. As a data technologist, his work is in the intersection between software engineering, research, design, and communication. Prior to ODI, he worked in applied machine learning research in a number of organizations, including the BBC. Andrew Dudfield leads the automated fact-checking team at FullFact and is focused on ensuring the automated fact-checking technology is developing in line with the needs of fact-checker around the world. Andy was previously the Chief Publishing Officer of the Office for National Statistics, and prior to that, spent a decade working in product and technology role at the BBC. So let me now mention a couple of practical things before we start. We will first hear the presentations and we'll then have the Q&A session at the end. So please feel free to write your questions into the meeting chat anytime. During the Q&A session, we can then either ask the questions for you or you can raise your hand in Teams and ask the questions yourself. Of course, we will make you are able to unmute yourself as a Q&A session. As always, this Global Network webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the Global Network of Data Officers and Statisticians at yammer.com/unstats. We invite you to continue the discussion on the Global Network after the webinar. Now, let me pass the floor to our first speaker, Andy. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Can I just check, can you see the slides?
Excellent. Yeah, I can see your slides.
Brilliant. Thanks. Thank you so much. So thank you for the opportunity to speak at this event. It's something that I have a long-standing interest in, and I'm keen to share our story about good information, fact-checking, and the really vital importance of official statistics in enabling fact-checking and the processes that are associated with it. So just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Andy. I'm the head of automated fact-checking at an organization called FullFact based in the UK. Before I joined FullFact, I was the Deputy Director for the UK Office for National Statistics, where I was responsible for the publishing of all official statistics in the UK produced by the ONS, which is about half of all statistics from a data technology and editorial point of view. So the working in a fact-checking has been an interesting build for me from that initial journey. So FullFact is a fact checker. We're based in the UK and we're going about 10 years. I want to just highlight briefly the importance, I think, of fact-checking and in its role in addressing misinformation. Bad information is a very important issue. It ruins lives, it damages democracy, and it hurts people's health. And I think this is a really foundational thing. I think sometimes people think about misinformation or fake news as a somewhat trivial topic, and it's really anything but that. We've seen over the last 18 months, 2 years, people making really profound choices about their health and the health of those that they care about around whether vaccinations and so on, that are incredibly important personal choices that need to be made from substantive information. And the vast range of misinformation we've seen around things like anti-vax information has been incredibly difficult to address. And I think it's the importance of good information and making sure that people are informed and able to make the societal choices that they need to make is incredibly important. And so as a fact-checking organization, we are here to take the most important things that can cause damage to people's health, make sure that they are fact-checked and provide people with the right information that they need. Because bad information simply ruins lives. And I think we've all know people who have been seduced by some of this bad information recently. And the importance of making sure that good information can counter the bad information is incredibly important. So I want to talk to you about some work that we've been doing in Full Fact, but I want to tell you that this is a story of a partnership. We were very lucky about 2 years ago to receive some funding from an organization, google.org, which is a funder that's part of the Google team, to fund us, Full Fact in the UK, to work in collaboration with AfricaCheck, who are a fact-checking organization based in several countries in Africa, and Chequiado, who are a fact-checker based in Argentina, and the Open Data Institute, where my colleague Fionntan is from, who are based in London in the UK, to look at how we could use artificial intelligence in the process of fact-checking. So that is to seeing where we can use technology to expedite processes that are part of fact-checking. One of the interesting things has been to try and understand, looking across the globe, looking in different contexts, about how to address misinformation. And I think it's one of the things that makes this project interesting is that it comes from those multiple perspectives. So I want to do a couple of things in this introductory remarks. I want to talk you through our use of technology. I want to talk you through our use of data and how important it is to us. And then I'll hand over to Fionntan, who is going to describe some of the practical steps that we've tried to put in place and some of the guidance that we've tried to outline of how those involved in the publishing of official statistics and those involved in the fact-checking process can better work together to ensure that we have the right access to the right information at the right time to make sure that our work can have the greatest impact that it can. So let's take a look at our technology. We try to do 3 things with the use of artificial intelligence and other technologies in the fact-checking process. Firstly, we try to identify the right things to fact-check every day. This is a really important choice because there are about 200 fact-checking organizations around the world, and each of them is working incredibly hard, but can only produce so many fact checks. And so every time we choose to fact check something, there are hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of things that we're not fact checking. So AI, artificial intelligence, and a bunch of technology is usually quite a helpful process in being able to triage misinformation, to bring order to the chaos, take that fire hose of the internet and try and hone in by combing through all of the media that we monitor to find the most important things to fact check. And the media that is monitored means newspaper websites, TV programs, radio broadcasts, social media, a whole collection of different information that we will draw in, process, categorize, identify where people are making claims, identify who is making the claims, and use those pieces of information to help us identify the most important things to check. Secondly, we want to find repeats of things that we've previously fact-checked. This is about making sure that each fact check that we write works as hard as it possibly can. So if person A makes a claim and we write a fact check about that, if it's then repeated by person B, we want to be able to make sure that we can reuse the same fact check and apply it to multiple people. So we've been doing some work with, again, using artificial intelligence to try and identify repeats of misinformation where people say different words that mean the same things. So if I was to ask you, what is your age and how old are you? Everybody would recognize that I'm asking the same question, even though I'm using different words. So we're trying to use technology to try and understand the paraphrasing of statements so we can apply each fact check that is written to multiple instances, increasing the impact of our work. And also, excitingly, we're trying to speed up the process of fact checking by introducing automations as part of that process. And those automations are where things like official statistics become very important, because we can automatically identify the intention of somebody's claim. We can understand that they're talking about the economy or employment rates or poverty statistics. And we may well know that there's some official data that sits behind that. And we're interested in being able to access that data as quickly as possible so that in near to real time, we can identify if somebody has said something that is correct or incorrect. So fairly briefly, this is what it looks like in action. So this is us transcoding a press conference from Boris Johnson earlier this year. And we're starting to work through and classify the statements that are said in real time to identify where they're about quantities, where there are personal opinions, where they're predictions. And where they're about quantities, we try to understand where that initial data can come from so that we can find out whether we've either fact-checked it previously or whether we can automatically detect that some information sits behind that we can then start to use. And the challenge for this from a technology point of view is that we need to make sure that we can access good information. And statistical publishing is a complex world. I have some understanding of that from my time working for ONS, and it's a very wide-ranging topic. Sometimes content can be an HTML page, sometimes it can be in a PDF, sometimes it can be in a spreadsheet, sometimes it can be available as open data. And some of those things are easier to work with than others. So we've produced these systems that are starting to work to enable the automated process of fact-checking, always verified by a human, never fully automated, but using open data that is published in the UK. And that means that we can start to do things like this. We can take a statement that inflation is rising, and we can start to process what inflation means. We can start to process what rising means. We can start to graph and make a simple time series of that information over a period of time. And we can start to verify whether rising makes sense in this instance. I will come back to the second part of this statement a little bit later on, where we're talking about rising inflation means that there is pressure. Pressure is an interesting word which we'll get to, but it is important that in this instance, this is a claim that was made by a real person, and we could identify the information that sat behind it, and we're able to bring about this information programmatically and apply it into our systems and understand in real time whether something was right or wrong. And broadly speaking, we're able to do that because of some good publishing of information from the ONS in the UK. They have a time series of this information that sits behind these slightly bewildering codes, but there is a time series URL which produces a HTML page which has a graph on it. However, alongside that, I know that if I put in the words /data onto the end of that URL, I will get access to the underlying information itself. So if I'm a human, I can look at that graph, but if I'm programming machines, I know that I can get access to the underlying data, bring that back and then apply it in our fact-checking process. And it's really important that we're able to do that in that we don't have to start searching around for various things. We're not looking in PDFs because computers aren't good at that. We just have access to the information that we need. It's very important, and it sped up our processes no end. And this is part of a general plea I think we have, and Fionntan will discuss this more in a moment, but taking a look at the idea of how do we make information that is available from National Statistical Publishing offices and institutes and make that information available so that other people can use it. Sometimes this can be buried away in various portals or behind passwords or through kind of complicated systems or in images. And it's very hard for us to be able to access that information and do the fact checking that we want to undertake. And this is something that's really important with our fact checks as well. I'm always worried that every time that we write a fact check that we just publish it on a web page and it just sits there by itself, not doing very much. And so we want to try and make sure that each fact check that we write works harder and harder. So we follow open standards ourselves around the publishing of fact checks. We make sure that we mark up our fact checks with the right technical code behind the scenes so that they can be easily used by other people, and so that they can be integrated into things like Google search results, or they can be used by Facebook, or they can be used by YouTube, and any other manner of technical company that we're working with to ensure that the information that we publish plays well with other parts of the internet. And so we have this idea that each fact check is not just published on our site, it's deeply embedded. It works across this network of information to make sure that everything we write works as hard as it can. And I think official statistics have a similar role. I would ask that we consider how do we publish that information so that it is easy for other people to consume, use and bring into their work, because fact checks are an interesting example of impact from statistical publishing, because we can cite official statistics, we can ensure that our content is seen by lots of people, and we can ensure that the use of statistics is foundational to the addressing of bad information. For last year, full facts information was seen hundreds of millions of times across internet platforms, and that's a number that I think makes people start to notice. So that's the pitch for me. To address the bad information, we need good information, and core statistical publishing is one of the best sources of good information that exists. And we're interested in how we can more quickly and easily access that information. And finally, I was talking about the fact that we can address information, but we're interested in the word pressure. And I think this is a collection of other things that sit around this. And Fionntan will start to walk into this world now, but making sure that information is published with the right information around it. So a statistic by itself is very powerful, but a statistic that has the right context, caveat, provenance, identifiers, making sure that we know if it's an abnormality or whether the statistical process is changed or whether there was a change in methodology, the administrative data that was used was changed. That helps us understand whether we can take that value and use it as it is, or whether we need to apply other systems to that as well. So that's the problem space from me about the use of technology in fact checking and how important it is to have high quality official statistics published so that we can use them in our process. And to try and address that a little bit more practically, I'm going to hand over to Fionntan, who's going to run you through some of our work in this area.
Great. Nicely done, Andy. Thanks very much. Yeah, so I will now present and I'll share my screen, and surely nothing can go wrong in a live presentation. We'll see now. Hang on. And so that's telling me it's sharing right now. And is that looking okay? Can you see that slide? If anyone wants to reply.
That looks great, Fionntan. We can see that.
Great. It's good to know. Okay. Hurdle 1. Overcome. Yeah, okay, so yeah, I guess Andy's kind of laid the groundwork for kind of the vision or whatever, and maybe you saw a lot of maybe you think you saw a lot of kind of the high end, like live AI, live fact checking of using national statistics and building these automated systems, but on the ground there's lots of small steps, and we definitely do not see this as a project or trying to create guidance just to kind of, oh yeah, that's good for national statistics offices with lots and lots of resources. We think everyone can do their publishing just a little bit better, and we're trying to encourage everyone to get that next step, such that they publish better, such that the fact-checking process becomes quicker. Yeah, so as we said, fact checkers, they can use many data sources to verify the truth of claims. They can use government departments, health services, academic papers, surveys, as you call the national statistical systems. But we're focused on national statistical offices in this case, and we've kind of reviewed and talked to fact checkers about how they use those and how they use data from them. Yeah, and so you're this audience does not need any introduction to these. So we're kind of surveying how things are published on the websites. For example, Statistics South Africa, the Office of National Statistics, the Argentinian Institute of National Statistics and Census. I'm not going to try the Spanish, I would just embarrass myself. And for instance, the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation in India. Obviously, there are hundreds of, I think almost 200 of them around the world. Yeah, project backstory that Andy already gave is from google.org, funded by that. They have an AI impact challenge, and it kind of comes from that. Andy's kind of talked about one side, the big side of the project of automating fact checking. But what this side of the project is looking at is creating guidance for national statistic offices to say, here's some basic, approachable, easily accomplished next steps for publishing better, and then some other guidance on the fact checker side, kind of saying, to make them understand or make them see that what good quality data looks like, such that they can kind of advocate for it and kind of improve the relationship with the NSO in their country, such that they can advocate for better statistical data, better publishing of statistical data in their country. We also realized that publishing statistics isn't just about publishing in the right format. There's huge amounts of work, which everyone here knows, that goes into even creating those along governance lines and many other parts, but we're just going to focus on that endpoint of publishing and how that can be improved. So yeah, as we said, we have this data. This is kind of our we have this data publishing guide, which we've created. It kind of does try to do. It does two jobs, as I said, just about publishing some steps to like publish data better, and also kind of showing or explaining why fact checkers are really kind of important data users of national statistics, and hopefully trying to improve that relationship between national statistics offices and fact checkers. And as I said, this guidance for fact checkers that we're almost, we'll hopefully have them out for comment next week. But this one is actually up right now. Andy, if you want to be kind enough to, maybe you could also possibly put it into the chat if that's possible. But you can also contact me and I can happily share the link to this. So this is a slide from Full Fact, kind of looking like it's kind of a training slide for new fact checkers, and it says the fact checking process, right? So I don't need to go into each of those, but if we kind of look at it, there's at least three parts of this that are all dependent on quality of national statistics kind of in the country. Deciding what you're checking, easy to find the data that you need to check the claim, and then also the quality of what's being published as well. Yeah, so even so that it kind of shows just straight off the top the importance of this. So what we're going to do now is kind of run through examples that we found that kind of illustrate the points and kind of break down the steps in the fact-checking process and where it's affected and how it's affected by publishing of national statistical data. The examples we're going to give are not illustrative. This is not a kind of a big literature review. It's just representative. It's some examples that we found that we think shows our points. There's a range in some aspects. There's different continents, publishing methods, resources of the NSO. We're sadly, myself and Andy admit our own language shortcomings, and they're often English-based from our examples. That's our own limitations, really. But we're not trying to be judgmental. We're not saying these people are the best and these people aren't great. We're just trying to encourage everyone, trying to lift all boats really in this space. So yeah, we're going to break down these steps now in the fact-checking process and kind of look at examples of how they're from real life that we found that if these are improved, then it kind of helps the fact-checking process. So first off, choosing what to verify. You can't fact-check something unless data actually exists in the country about it. If I say the inflation's gone up 1.2% in this quarter, you have to know what know about the NSO, know that it publishes on that topic, know that it publishes per quarter on that. Have to know the limits of that data. Is it trustworthy? What's the depth? What's the quality? So it's kind of like you have, and fact-checking maybe organizations, they kind of build up a kind of inherent knowledge or kind of cultural knowledge of what statistics are available in their country. And so if you look at statistical offices, so South Africa, they kind of show the subjects, as they call them, that they cover, and also the themes that they cover, kind of making it clear to audiences, to data users, what data they can kind of find. Statistics Canada calls it subjects of the different things they cover. And then with the Argentinian NSO, they just say right at the top, there's education, culture, commerce, tourism there as well. Yeah, so just that example of kind of making it clear what this NSO covers and does not cover as well, such that, for instance, like a fact-checking organization is not going to spend lots of time trying to find data on a topic that doesn't exist. Yeah, speaking of finding, there's also improving. This is often related to search as well. So, right, okay, I know that the NSO in my country publishes on the economy or the environment, right? That's one thing. Being able to find the exact data set that I need is another step. And that can be, as we all know, can be really quick and easy. And other times can be very painful and very long, and maybe involves contacting, 4 different people, getting passed through them and trying to talk to those people as well. So lots of things that NSOs can do to improve that. Good quality metadata on their data sets. Data sets have their own page. the quality of the search engine on the honest NSO. Often fact checkers, like everyone, will use external search engines. Don't need to name them. We all know them. Yeah, to find what they need as well. So that's also about those pages being indexed well, and also human support. It's a big thing as well. Just be able to ask someone who's going to respond quickly in a way you can rely on, that they go, oh yeah, sure, we have data on that. Here it is. Here's the link to it. For instance, I put just economy 2019 into the India, UK, Nigeria websites, and we can see that there's different ways of filtering that. Filtering that information, there's different way of presenting those search results such that you get to the data sets you want quicker. And so that's a design question that has to be thought about. You can see with the Nigeria one, you can select the sector, category, subcategory, all things to filter to get you to where you want the data sets that you want. The Office of National Statistics in the UK say whether you can filter by time series or data sets, or maybe it's an article you're looking for. As we said, the external ones, like marking up in good metadata. So the Office of National Statistics, you can also search those data sets using external search engines, say Google Dataset Search, which came out in the last couple of years. But interestingly, maybe as an example where this doesn't work, I kind of tried to look up for the Irish Central Statistics Office, and it doesn't seem to have that connection. I'm not blaming the CSO or Google in this one. It's just something is not connecting here. This metadata is not available. It can't be crawled by this Google Dataset Search. So yeah, so it's so this population, these data sets aren't showing up in these results. So I need to know the CSO exists, which isn't often the case if you're searching on a new country, and then I need to navigate their system. I can't use an external thing in this case. Accessing data. So right, okay, I found the page so as a fact checker, I found the page that has the data sets that I need, data sets, reports, whatever I need. What format is this data in? Is it easy to work with? Very, 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 very often you'll find data sets are inside a PDF or an image. We find fact checkers saying sometimes you'll see a pie chart perhaps in an image, but the underlying data isn't available. So then they have to go and hand type out all the data from that thing as well. Like data tables inside PDF. Again, I can't take that into Excel or any spreadsheet software and start doing my analysis on it. So we're always encouraging, please publish data tables in CSVs or spreadsheet files. Not always the case for some NSOs. Reports that go along with data sets, they could be PDFs, that's fine. They could also be web pages as well, maybe which allow you to kind of show video, interactive graphics, things like that. And also now, which some NSOs are doing, is APIs, application programming interfaces, which allows kind of maybe more tech savvy or software people to create programs which fetch the data they need without having to go through websites and make it a more automated process. So yes, like simple things you can do. Statistics South Africa, they have the report, you can download it as PDF, that's fine. But then you can also download the data that's in that report as a separate XLS file in this case, but also a PDF as well. Just kind of making it so that people can do their own analysis quickly without having to work through the format of PDF. Statistics Canada has, you can access these tables on their site, but you can also easily download them in these tables in CSV as well. And portals are very, very common ways of publishing data, or the format in which data is published on websites. These can be very helpful. These can be helpful sometimes, but not. We would also encourage that the data in them is also kind of indexable and searchable and findable from in that kind of open web data part of the web format that Andy was talking about as well. And examples of APIs, there is the Office of National Statistics, Statistics Canada have it, and this is also from Sweden as well, these APIs. Now, next case is like, right, okay, now you have access to the data, right? Okay, so but what about, these are just numbers. You need, a fact checker is like, in kind of the best sense of a journalist, like they're there to kind of take these raw numbers, like do analysis, give context, and kind of explain that to a broad audience, make the data, put the data to work in a sense. And so does the NSO provide analysis that fact checkers can use? And how do they use it? How do they cite it? Or does the fact checker have to create their own analysis? Do they have to create their own graphs, their own visualizations to explain the data that's going on? So these visualizations can come from the fact checker, could also come from the NSO. Maybe it's screen grabbed or whatever. Maybe it's easily downloadable. Is this data that's up there, say it's in the right format, is it well structured? Is it well described? Is there good documentation that makes it easy to interpret? Do I know important context or caveats around the data that makes it easy to understand? But yeah, so like quite typical, like a regular report or whatever, and it has that analysis. Like, you know, if I'm a fact checker in Uganda, I can screenshot this, like quote some of the stuff, but also like screenshot, say the graph here and kind of use that in my fact check as well. Then you see maybe something from the ONS. It's not in a PDF. It's on its own HTML web page, and it has nice functions like there's this big report, but I can instantly click on something to see all the data related to this report. All the data sets are there, and I can find them. And also, you see it has things for interactive graphics as well, which are useful, but also you can see that I can download that image as a regular file, but I can also download the data behind it as well for use elsewhere. I've mentioned this a couple of times. Fact checkers, when we interviewed them in multiple countries, said having a good relationship with the NSO is so important for their work. Some places are fantastic and they have really good contact, good relationships, good communication, timely. And other places it can be quite hard to kind of get in contact with who they want to contact. So it's about NSOs making clear what are the different communication points, who can be reached, I have a question about certain data sets, who do I contact in the organization? Is it at the organizational level? Is it the individual? Is it a team? And also just kind of more outreach, better outreach of kind of building relationships over time as well. What we see from the Irish Central Statistics Office is they kind of say all the subject matter contacts. If I want to know about aviation statistics in Ireland, and I kind of click that, and it gives me the email address and I think the phone number of who I should contact in the organization. I don't need to contact info@cso.ie and then pass through 3 people before I find who I need to find. Yeah, Pakistan Bureau of Statistics, just a page with listing everyone in the organization. I can't fault this. This is great. Like, I can get to these people straight away. I kind of know who to contact directly. The National Bureau of Statistics or the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, has it more around state offices, and I can contact each of those has a more regional based. Fine, also. Canada, it's just a nice example, very clear. It's like you can contact us in these numbers, you can email us on this. Our office hours are between these 2 times. Clear, reliable information. And then lastly, which is nice from Canada as well, is they kind of talk about the kind of more outreach work as well. They kind of work with certain groups, work with data users to improve the relationship and improve the use of the data as well. Lastly is so the fact checkers, they've used the data, they're writing up their fact check, whatever. And lastly, they have to reference, they have to talk about the organization they're representing. The trust in the fact checker is kind of being passed through and from the data from the NSO as well. So it's like, what does the fact checker link to? The data set? Is it the page with the data? Is it the report about the data? Do they have to explain the organization? Do they have to make clear if it's their own analysis or is it the NSO's analysis? How do they show or kind of talk about maybe context or caveats about how the data was collected? These are kind of questions that often aren't obvious, or how data should be cited from NSOs, or how it should be talked about. And so that's another challenge for the fact checker in how they use NSO data. Every talk needs a big TED Talk-esque fancy inspirational slide, but we know national statistics takes time, but fact checkers are really, really important users, and advocates for better national statistics data. They're there, they use this data all the time, they really want to see it improve. And we hope that NSOs kind of see them as can be hugely impactful people, and as Andy said with the numbers he quoted, hugely impactful users of that data as well. And so we kind of hope that NSOs around the world embrace or build up good relationships with the fact checkers in their country. Yeah, if you have thoughts on any of this, yeah, I am FOD at the ODI, and Andy is there at andrew.dudfield@fullfact.org. And yeah, that's about it from me. I will stop sharing, and there's me. Yeah, I'm back.
Thank you so much, Fionntan, and also Andy for these great presentations and the tools, which is definitely interesting for our attendees, I believe. And the tools itself can basically leverage API, AI, machine learning to do the fact checking, which is awesome. So now let's move to the Q&A session, and we are now enabling our attendees to unmute themselves and open the camera. So now I can see that there are a couple questions has been posted on the chat box. The first one is from Alexander Blackburn. I'm not sure, Alexander, if you want to ask the question yourself, or I can raise a question for you.
Easy. Hi everyone. There's more a question for the participants in this webinar rather than the speakers. Just in Andy's presentation, he gave the example of the ONS where they have the /data link with all of their HTML articles, and I wondered if there's any other international organisations with that policy. Thanks.
I'm not quite sure how to address that, because that was a question to the wider group. I'm not aware of anyone specifically myself, but if others would like to, I mean, it would be an interesting conversation now if there are others with views on that.
Okay, thanks, Andy. And see, and another question that we have right now in the chat box is from Laura. So Laura, I'm not sure if you want to ask the question yourself. Or I can maybe, okay, yeah, Laura, go ahead.
Yes, so thank you for the interesting presentation. So I was just wondering, UNICEF is developing an internal initiative, which is called the Real-Time Data Initiative, to develop solutions for management and programs. We are trying to leverage the existing solutions and also developing new ones. So to make sure that the right data are in the right hands at the right time. So as part of the initiative, we are working also on use cases for data integration. I was wondering, how do you ensure that the most updated data are published and hopefully integrated with other data sources in a trustworthy manner? And how do you make technology? We are struggling with systems which don't talk to each other. And this is a separate question. Do you use a fact checking also for counterterrorism and prevention of violent extremism online? Thank you. Sorry for the long question.
That's great. I'll take a go at a couple parts of that, Laura, but you know, it's a wide-ranging set of questions. So fact checking depends on different fact checkers will have different policies. Usually it is not so much about the extremist content. I mean, that's more of a legal issue. Fact checking is more about good information, and so is broadly in the realms of things that are not illegal, and it's information that can be on platforms. People have opinions, but we want to make sure that we're interjecting at a slightly different phase in those conversations. There are other excellent, very good initiatives for that more kind of extreme area of things, and perhaps fact checking is not the right tool for that point. In terms of interoperability of standards and making sure that technical systems talk to each other, Yes, great, difficult question. And I think the answer that we lean on really is around open standards. So there are many different ways of having proprietary systems that can only talk to other proprietary systems. And what we're seeing with the web of data and of fact checks is making your information part of the web, meaning publish it using standards that already exist. Publish it using well-defined open standards means that you have a much greater chance of other people being able to use it. And my sense is that it's not a good idea to publish information as an island that people will come to. It's a responsibility of those who are publishing information to try and make it available through the formats and flavors that mean it can permeate across the web to make it easy for other people to use. And I think it's incumbent on all of us who are publishing information to make sure that it, particularly information that is good information that could be repurposed for good, to make it as easily available for other people to use as possible. I think it's just it's the only real way that we can resolve this. Fionntan, I don't know if you have anything to add to that one.
No, not really. Just other to say that, yeah, that's maybe it's an area of which I guess sadly we see that there's a lot of basic and like quite easy things to achieve in terms of data publishing that can be done. But I mean, you might go on the front page of some NSO's website and there's ticker tape and fancy interactive visualizations on, and they're not even putting the data in CSVs. You know what I mean? Something's getting lost in terms of the, like, they're obviously like even stuff like they must have data in tables in Excel files, then put them into PDFs and then the actual data itself. So those open standards are available and exist and don't need a huge budget either, which we're trying to often as well. We're not saying everyone needs to build their own huge portal or huge API or whatever. If you have, and even APIs are often cheap or doable, but we're saying that a lot of this is cheap and easily doable, and we're just trying to promote that. Let's get the basics right before we kind of like build big lumbering systems of publication.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for answering this question. Yeah, I totally believe that. And now I see Sean has your hands raised. So Sean, do you want to ask anything?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to ask two questions. One question was about the natural language processing. I just wanted to get a feel for if your team uses any semantic approaches, using ontologies or this sort of thing, just because we do a lot of work in this field, and I'd be curious to know if this was an approach that your team decided to take, just to see if we're thinking along the same lines. Linked open data, that sort of thing. The next question I had was maybe a little bit more philosophical, but I wanted to know how, when I was listening, I was thinking about this ability to automatically check facts in a speech, in a statement. It occurred to me that hypothetically, your team could provide a service to politicians so they could kind of like pre-check their speeches to make sure it's factual. It's like, and then it occurred to me that may not do anything to combat misinformation. I don't know if you know what I'm saying. That misinformation is more than just getting your facts straight. It's more of a question. And just by way of example, I have a daughter, and she's notorious for correcting us for being incorrect, but her corrections are often not at a level where it changes the nature of the conversation. So I wanted to know if this was something that your team relates to. And so, are we combating misinformation if we focus on fact checking, or is there more to it than that? That's my question. Thanks.
Thanks, Sean. Two completely separate but excellent questions. So on the first bit around the semantics, yes, to an extent. The processes we use vary quite wildly. So some of it is natural language processing. We're quite heavy users of the open source BERT model that sits behind, which was produced by Google, which a lot of organizations use. But we also do enrichment. We are big fans of Wikidata. And so we use that as the formulation of usually breaking down sentences to identify who has said them and where. We will use Wikidata as identifiers for that. And we're also in the process of enriching our outputs to take those Wikidata identifiers with it, so that people can build systems of all the fact checks about claims by a particular person or institute or something like that. So it's a mixture of technologies, and we are, broadly speaking, adopting a policy of just trying to use the right technology rather than being kind of particularly specific about we are one type of development or another. And in terms of the fact checking, it's a really great question. I think there's a couple of things from that. So firstly, fact checking has evolved over the last 10 or so years. Certainly fact checking, which broadly started in the US as the first kind of real kind of collection of fact checkers, was based on the idea that if you fact check somebody, that will make a difference. It's sort of like the shame of being fact checked, or the undertaking of a fact check will change behaviors. And manifestly, that did not do the trick. So there's generally an idea of a second or third generation of fact checkers, which is about change. And so certainly from a full facts point of view, and I believe with Checkiada and Africa Check as well, we will always ask for a correction of the record. And so that is an additional step to not just say we fact checked you, but you need to do something about this. And that process of asking a newspaper to add a correction or an MP to go on record to say that they got something wrong is a more powerful system, because those individual claims can be then corrected. And then we can use those to build our bodies of evidence so we can look for wider systemic change. So that's around changes to policy, legislation, the way that internet companies work. There are a lot of different layers that we can interface with that. But certainly the individual claims and the fact checks are the sort of the atomic unit of evidence. They have an impact themselves because they're seen by lots of people, but we have to add those up to create the extra pressure for a wider change.
So I'm not sure, Fionntan, if you have anything to add. If not, I can pass to us. Okay. So Alex, I see you have the hands up. Please go ahead to ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Andy and Fionntan, for this presentation and for stressing how important it is to make the data readily available in easy ways, and in ideally of course using APIs and so on. There was a comment by Alex Blackburn in the chat, CSV for the win. So yeah, sometimes the easiest file format is probably the easiest to use and to implement and so on. Towards the end of your presentation, of your part of the presentation, Fionntan, you have mentioned that of course it's sometimes important and necessary to contact human beings, I would say, in the National Statistical Office to ask for clarification, or to ask where do you have this information on your website, we couldn't find it, and so on. I was just wondering whether you also collect information about how quickly basically those national statistical offices turn around when you send a question to them, whether it takes 2 hours, 2 days, or 3 weeks. I mean, you don't need to shame or somebody specifically. I'm just wondering whether you collect data on that. Thank you.
Yeah, we should collect perfect statistics on that and perfectly openly publish them so people can use it. Yeah, no, unfortunately not. And I guess it goes back to maybe the limitations of our time and approach. So like, this isn't systematic reviews. This is kind of like good practice, really. But definitely talking to fact checkers, it's all over the place. Like some places, even in really rich countries with lots of resources, you know, you send an email and it's dead. Like so that is an infinite amount of time, basically. I don't know if you could do averages on infinite, but yeah, you just don't hear back at all. And you're just trying different random routes into the organization to find the person. Very frustrating, hugely time wasting, and especially fact checkers. A lie gets around the world, halfway around the world before truth gets its boots on, as they say. Fact checking is very time dependent as well. And if there's not clear directions on, and it's not just clear directions who to contact, it's just reliable. They know that's going to be the place they can contact. Everyone seemed like when it was a positive relationship, it tended to be very. They had a person, they had a reliable person that they knew they could go to, really, and it was, they were often calling as well for maybe because as journalists love calling people up. As a tech person, I hate calling people up. So it was often they had people they could rely on, that they could call up and get an answer. They knew they would get an answer immediately. It was very popular with fact checkers as well. So yeah, some places it's very quick, very reliable because of good relationships. Other places, it's often a dead end. And some places are very hierarchical as well, and only one person at the top of the organization is allowed to speak to anyone. We probably wouldn't encourage that. Yeah, and you see all sorts of types as well. And well, the Irish one was a good example because it was finding subject matter expertise as well is often what's needed. The ONS often have like who to contact about this data set. The data set will have a page, and it'll say, this is the person to contact. Please, if you have any questions about it, please contact this person as well. But it might be team-based or department-based as well. It's there's lots of approaches, and it's kind of what works in your environment and for the people in your country, really, in the way they want to talk. Some places have fax, but maybe not everyone needs a fax machine, really. So it's dependent, really. But reliability was the biggest question.
Yeah, that's true. I totally agree with you. And we have another question so far from the chat. It is about full fact, the fact checks. So once the decision has been made on what fact to check, what is typically the processing time until you produce the fact check? I'm aware that it can be various, but is there any benchmark expected processing time?
Thanks, Patrick. Great question again. It is very, very hard to quantify this because it varies massively depending on what we're fact checking. If we need to track down multiple primary sources or speak to an academic expert, it can be as long as it takes to speak to those people. But broadly, I would characterize it as hours rather than days is the time frame for fact checks. And I think, as Fionntan mentioned, there is a time dependency. So being able to get the good information out as quickly as possible to stop things in their nascent form before it becomes a viral, so to speak, is really important. So yeah, we try and make sure that we have those prompt turnarounds.
Cool. Yeah, I totally understand. I don't see any other question being posted on the chat box. And Alex, I'm not sure if you see any hands up. I don't see from my side.
No, I just wanted to add maybe one question from me, if this is okay. You have mentioned at the beginning that you are using also artificial intelligence basically to identify, sometimes in real time when you have a speech, to identify the facts or the data presented there, so you can then fact check that data, and that technology greatly helps you with that. My question would be whether there are also fact-checking organizations that use fully automated processes, basically where you try to identify with the technology some data presented by people, and then automatically, without human intervention, to check whether this is actually true or false. Thank you.
So I suspect there are some organizations who will try to do that. My personal view is that technology isn't quite ready for it. In terms of language is incredibly complicated, and context is incredibly difficult to get machines to be astute in processing. They can do an awful lot of things. AI is increasingly advanced, increasingly fast and powerful. And you can see this in things like voice assistants, the kind of questions you can ask your phone or your smart speaker. But I believe at the moment, the best process is that you ensure that there is a human in that loop. You can save time by presenting something for a human to verify as right or wrong, yes or no, useful or not useful. But I strongly believe that it's important to make sure that that human is there. And we're very lucky in terms of fact checkers, because that person tends to be a brilliant journalist who's very good at spotting where the machine goes wrong. And so I think if you're chasing the perfection needed to fully automate, you'll slow down your ability to provide good information. And I think that's maybe the lesson that I would try and draw through all of this, is that there is some high-end stuff that we want to do with this in terms of full automation and in terms of being able to process things very quickly. But to get to that, there are lots of quite small steps that are needed. So going from a PDF to a PDF with the date added to it, from a PDF to an Excel file to a CSV file to some metadata. I think it's, my sense is that from a statistical publishing point of view, every statistical office has a step in front of them, a small step at times that they can take that will make the process of fact checking easier and faster. And I would ask you all to consider that, because it does make a difference to our world, and the fact checks that we can publish from that will be seen by hundreds of millions of people. And that's a story that you can take to your director generals and tell them that that's an impact from your statistic, and it feels like that's quite a nice thing to happen.
Okay, thank you, Andy, and thanks, Alex, for your question. So I don't see any other question, and I see Fionntan has posted a link again on the chat box. So please feel free to click on it, and also if you want to contact them, you can contact them directly. And later we will post our recording and along with the presentation to the global network. So I believe on the presentation, they also have their contact information. So please go ahead to contact them if you want. So, so thank you very much for attending this webinar. And one last thing before we conclude our webinar today is that right now on the global network itself, we have reached over 2,100 members, and we have conducted a survey to really understand, your basic experience so far on the global network. So it will be really helpful for us to improve our network, so make it better fit for your daily work. So please take this survey, and which my colleague Alex will post on the chat. So any feedback is highly appreciated. So with that, I guess we can conclude our webinar today. And maybe I can encourage you, our attendees today to unmute yourself and give our speakers, Fionntan and Andy, a round of applause for their great presentation.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Next week, we will have a global network webinar by a visualization specialist and artist. And the title of the talk is Speak Data. So please join us next week again. Thank you.